Our reading of Genesis chapter 3 continues as we turn in this segment to the judgment that God pronounces, beginning in verse 14. Turning to verse 14 then, we read, Vayomer Yahweh Elohim el Hanakash. Then Yahweh God, or the God Yahweh, said to the snake, the Nakash, Ki asitha zoth arurata mikol habahema. Here the key introduces an explanatory clause, because you have done this. Notice that previously God had questioned Adam and Eve about why they had done what they had done. Here he doesn't question the serpent. The serpent. Adam pointed to Eve, Eve pointed to the serpent. God doesn't question the serpent. Now he simply pronounces judgment upon him. Because you have done this. Arur ata. Arur is called passive participle, pretty much paradigm form. Nothing unusual about it. From the geminate verb to curse, arar, a fairly common word for curse in the Old Testament. So because you have done this, accursed are you. Mikol habahema. Here, more than, here the men is used to introduce a comparative idea with the adjective. So, cursed are you more than any behema. It is singular, though most English translations take it as a collective, meaning something like animal life. And so, translated as if it were plural, something like, cursed are you above all the animals or the beasts. The editors of BHS suggest that this phrase, plus the wow conjunction following it, may be an addition to the text. They give no reason for this, and it's hard to see why. There's no real textual evidence to support it. I suppose they might think that it is added because it's redundant. That is to say, we have the behema, and then we have the chayat hasadeh in the next phrase. So perhaps they see it as redundant. There is a distinction here. Behema is commonly used to refer not just to beasts, but specifically to those animals, larger ones like the ox and cattle, that are domesticated, as opposed to the chayat hasadeh in the next phrase, which often seems to imply undomesticated animals, wild animals. So the usage, if it is redundant, the usage of both behema and chayat hasadeh may intend to be inclusive of both domesticated animals and wild animals, I suppose we might say, undomesticated animals. But in any case, cursed are you more than any behema and more than any chayat hasadeh, any living thing of the field, literally. Animals of the field or wild animals, undomesticated animals. The judgment continues. Gahon ka telek, here, upon your gahon. Gahon is a noun only used twice. It refers to the ventral side as opposed to the back side, the dorsal side. That's not a particularly salubrious translation in English. Upon your dorsal side you shall go. So usually it's translated chest, belly, front, or something like that. Upon your ventral side you shall go, literally. Afar tokal kol yamei chayeka, and dust, afar, dust, tokal, call imperfect second person from akal, dust you shall eat, kol yamei chayeka, all the days of your life. So the judgment upon the serpent begins in this way, and then continues in the next verse with the relationship between the serpent and the progeny of the woman. Eva asitha benka uben ha'isha. So here, Eva is a noun that means hostility. It's related to the word for enemy, oyev, but Eva is hostility, enmity, hatred, perhaps, although that's an awfully strong word in terms of its connotations in modern English. So maybe hostility would be better. Hostility, ashitha. Here, this is first person imperfect call from the hollow verb sheath, which means to put or place or set, put something down, to set it down, or perhaps to put it in place. So enmity I will put in place, benka ubein ha'isha, between you and between the woman. And of course, you know the idiom in Hebrew for speaking about being between something is to repeat the word between. So between you and between the woman, in English we would simply say between you and the woman. And continuing, uvein za'aka uvein za'ara, between your progeny, your seed, zara, seed, here always used as a collective when it's referring to human progeny or descendants. So between your seed or your progeny and the progeny of her progeny. So the hostility that God is going to put between these two will continue throughout the generations to come. The pronouncement of judgment continues. He will yeshufka. He will grind you down, crush you, perhaps more generally attack you. The word shuf means to grind something down, to crush it, to rub it, or to break it. But here we're talking about the physical conflict between the two. So he, that is the seed of the descendant of the woman, will crush you, rosh, adverbial accusative. He will crush you with respect to the head. Ata teshufenu akev, and you will crush him. Here the suffix innu is the third person singular suffix in who, but the hey contracts and shows up as a doubled nun. This is the same verb that we had previously. This is often obscured by English translations that translate shuf in two different ways in these two clauses, but it's the same verb in Hebrew. So he will crush you with respect to the head, or perhaps attack you with respect to the head, and you will crush him or attack him with respect to the akev. And the akev is the back part of the foot, the heel, sometimes used for animals to refer to the entire hoof, but it's the part that comes down and strikes the ground first. So that's the pronouncement upon the serpent. In verse 16, God turns to the pronouncement of judgment upon the woman. El ha'isha amar, and to the woman he said, Herba erbe itzbonek wa heronech. So here, herba erbe. This is a Hippial infinitive absolute, herba, followed by Hippial imperfect for singular from the same root, rava, resh, beth, he, to, in the Hippial, to make much or make many or multiply in the sense of produce many of something. So here, normally with the infinitive absolute preceding, it's either certainty, communicates the idea of either certainty or doing something to its fullest degree. Probably here, the traditional translation, I will greatly increase, really increase to an extreme degree. Your itzbonek, and remember God is speaking to the woman here. Itzavon is the Hebrew noun meaning pain or toil or suffering. And all three of the occurrences, interestingly, of this word refer to judgment upon sin. It's used here in verse 16 to refer to Eve. It's used in the next verse, in verse 17, to refer to Adam. And the third occurrence is maybe the most interesting one in chapter 5, verse 29. It's used to refer to Noah in the sense that Noah's father gives him the name Noah because he hopes that Noah will be the one who will take away the judgment, the itzavon, that is the judgment upon both Adam and Eve because of their disobedience. So, in one sense, the judgment upon both Adam and Eve is the same. It's itzavon, pain, toil, suffering. So I will greatly increase your pain or toil or suffering and your heron, your pregnancy. So this is what in Hebrew we refer to as a case of hendiadys. Your pain and your pregnancy go together to create one idea. Your pregnancy pain, or pain in pregnancy, pain associated with pregnancy. So that's the idea here that's communicated by the use of these two words to communicate one idea, which is hendiadys in Hebrew. The next phrase, u ba'etzev teldi banim, and here we have another word for pain or toil or suffering. Notice it's not the same word, but it is the same root that we had in the previous one. So it's a variation on the same idea. We'd probably find a synonym in English to translate. So if we translated pain for one, we might translate toil or suffering in the other case. Your pain, or rather in pain, ba'etzev, in pain, or painfully, or through pain. Teldi, you will bear, here from yalad, second person imperfect call, feminine, singular. In pain, you will bear banim, you will bear sons. Wa'el ishek teshukatek, and to your husband, your ishek, your ish, with a suffix on the end, second feminine singular suffix on the end. So, to your husband, teshuktek. And here, this is a noun, shukah, desire or longing. So another aspect to Eve's suffering is that her desire or her longing will be in the direction of her husband, Ishak, wahu yimshal bak, and he will mashal, to rule or govern or exercise authority. In verse 17, God turns his judgment in the direction of the man. Adam amar, and to Adam, here without the definite article, so we usually translate it as the proper name when it doesn't have a definite article. So, and to Adam, he said, ki shamata lako ishteka, because you have heard or listened to, here shama perhaps in the sense of not just to physically hear, but to attend to pay attention to, or to obey. So because you have obeyed the voice of your wife, ishteka, here this is isha in the construct with a suffix on the end. Remember, suffixes are added to construct forms. So the construct of ishta in this case with the suffix ishtecha. So your wife, we would probably translate, you shall eat, or excuse me, with the result that, here the wow is consecutive but also consequential, with the result that you ate from the tree, and now we get a phrase describing the tree, which I commanded you, saying, you must not eat from it. Lo tokal meminu. Here, lo plus the imperfect, remember, can form this kind of permanent or long-term prohibition. So you must not, or you shall not, or even as a command, do not eat from it. This is what God commanded. It's a quotation within the quotation here. I commanded you, Lamor, saying, you must not eat from it, or do not eat from it. And because of this transgression, the judgment upon Adam is arur ha'adamah. Notice the pun here continues between Adam and the ground. So, cursed is the ground, ba'avurecha, on your behalf, or because of you. Here, Eve's suffering will come about as it relates to her function as the mother of all living things. Adam's judgment comes about through his function as one who tends the soil. So the judgment upon both is that the pain and toil and suffering that goes along with the performance of their God-given position is where the judgment will be manifest. So cursed is the ground on you, or on your behalf, or because of you. But itzavon, in pain, here's the same word again that we had before, in pain or toil, to kalena, you shall eat, kol yamei chayeka, all the days of your life. Here the point is that the ground will still produce its fruit, but now it will not produce it without the attendant toil and suffering that goes with having to get the ground to produce its fruit so that they may eat. In verse 18, the judgment continues. Wakotz waderder tatzmiach lach. And here this is just a matter of vocabulary. And coats is thorn or thorn bush. And thorn and derder, a very rare word only used twice for thistles. So, and thorn and thistles, and here again we probably have a case of hendiadys. So something like thorny thistles or thorny scrub brush, something like that, we might translate. Tatzmiach, here this is Hippial imperfect, third feminine singular, from the root sade mem chet, samach, to grow or sprout. So it, that is the ground, will sprout thorny thistles, lach, to you or for you. Wa akalta eth eshev hasadeh. Here, the wow may be kind of circumstantial. As you eat the eshev, the plant life, herbage of the field. So we might translate this initial wow in this phrase as either temporal or circumstantial, when you eat or as you eat of the herbage of the field. So God tells them they're going to continue to eat plant life as their sustenance, but now that plant life will be produced through itzavon, through pain, suffering, and toil. It's the toil that is the judgment and the suffering that will come from this for them as it relates to the performance of their various functions, Eve's as mother, Adam's as tender of the ground. That's verse 18. Turning to verse 19 now. B'zeath, here base preposition, plus zeah, the word for sweat. So in sweat or with sweat, and it's in the construct. So in the sweat of Afeka, literally your nose. So we might envision here sweat running down the face and dripping off the nose, although ap is sometimes used in a more general sense for kind of the features of your face, the nose being the most prominent feature of the face, perhaps. So I don't know if we want to translate it absolutely literally in the sweat that, sweat of your nose, or just, the traditional sweat of your brow gets the idea across, I suppose. But facial sweat is what we're talking about. And again, it's simply sweat as an image or figure of the suffering. It reflects the suffering. So through the sweat of your face, you will eat bread. The point being that, again, they will only be able to eat through the suffering that Adam will endure. Ad shuvka el ha'adamah, until shuvka is a call infinitive construct from shuv, to turn or to return. So until you're returning el ha'adamah, to the soil, to the ground. And now, why will he be returning to the ground? Ki mimenu lukakta, because from it, here min plus suffix, and we get this reduplicated form of min. So, and so with the suffix na, feminine, because ground is feminine. So because from it you were taken, lukakta, your pual perfect, second masculine singular from lakak, to take. Nothing unusual about the form, straight paradigm type form, but just that we don't see that many puals. For from it you were taken, or have been taken, ki afar ata, because you are dust. That is, here it's reminding Adam of his mortality, that he's made of the stuff of the earth. You are dust. El afar tashu, and to dust, tashu, you will return. So this is an expression of Adam's mortality, and that the body which he has inherited from the earth, in a sense, will be returned to the earth upon his death. So death is also included as part of the judgment, and in the sense that it is inevitable that he will die at the end of a life of pain and suffering that comes about because of the judgment that, as part of the judgment, I should say, that God pronounces upon Adam and upon Eve, and ultimately also upon the snake, because of their disobedience and rebellion against God. So that brings us to the end of the pronunciation of judgment, verses 14 to 19. In the last of the segments, as we read chapter 3, we'll turn to the concluding events in this scene as we wrap up our reading of Genesis chapter 3 with the next segment.